Let's start now with the assembly of the shifter engine. We take the semi-crankcase left side and insert the crankcase centering bushings. We take the secondary gearbox with the chain sprocket side towards the outside and the primary shaft in this position. We are then going to take the pin forks, first complete fork, and the second, which has a milled side that will be towards the side of the chain sprocket. We insert it in the gear wheel housing of the 5th and 6th spot, while the primary shaft fork is inserted in the 3rd, 4th gear housing. At this point, we take the gearbox like this and we are going to insert it inside the crankcase. Once the entire gearbox is inserted, we make sure that it turns correctly. Finally, we insert the crankshaft, modifying the connecting rod and the bearing bushings. Looking at the right side of the crankcase, making sure that everything is in order, well cleaned and degreased. We are going to spread the red sealing compound over the entire surface of the crankcase. Once the compound has been evenly spread, we are going to lightly clean the inside of the crankcase. And carefully insert the semi-crankcase. First, we put a cover on to protect the oil seal from the crankshaft. And we are going to do this by using a small mallet. At this point, we are going to take one of the 6x65 screws and the 3 6x50 screws. We check the tightening torque that needs to be at 12 Newton meters. Now we turn our crankcase and we insert the two 6x45 screws
Andiamo ad inserire le due uviti 6x45
in correspondence with the suction.
le tre viti
The three 6x40 screws, and finally the five 6x55 screws.
6x55.
We check the tightening torque, always using the torque wrench, which needs to be, yes, at 12 Newton meters. Finally, before continuing, let's check that the stroke recovery of the crankshaft, the shafts and the gear shaft are correct. We now continue with the assembly of the selector unit. We are going to assemble the ratchet, inserting the springs into the two holes. We lay the two toes, take the two ratchets with the flat side towards the outside and the milled side towards the toe. We are then going to close the ratchet. And then insert it in the ratchet retaining plate. At this point, we place it inside with a washer. Then, using a plumber's wrench to lightly push the ratchets into position. We take a drop of screw retainer compound to place on the two 6x14 screws with a washer. We are now going to take the selector pin. We insert a cogwheel and we expand the spring like this. We insert the shim ring and seal the top of the cover using some red sealing compound. Once the cover has been put on, we first place the two 6x14 countersunk head screws, which will center the cover,
il coperchio e infine
and the six 6x14 pan head screws.
inseriamo infine
Finally, insert the secondary shaft
l'albero
with a sealing O-ring for the gear oil,
di tenuta dell'olio del cambio,
the
una
bushing
botola con la
with the milled side for the O-ring,
il pignone
the
catena
chain sprocket,
e il seggiatore.
and the 20mm Sega ring. At this point, we can move to the primary transmission,
Primaria,
inserting a new 19mm Sega ring.
nuovo,
The main sprocket,
primario,
and another 19mm QR Sega ring.
19.
Making sure that it fits well inside the housing.
Ben dentro la cava.
Now we put the two steel washers,
Rotelle d'acciaio,
the primary shaft bushing,
dell'albero primario, e
and the two cages,
tutti i rulli siano
and we are going to check that all the rollers are in their proper place. Finally,
andremo
after having cleaned and degreased the surface, we are going to seal the cover of the primary transmission with a red sealing compound.
il coperchio della trasmissione primaria.
Let's check to make sure that we have inserted the two centering bushings of the cover correctly. We are then going to insert the two 6x30 in correspondence of the two centering bushings and the other five 6x25 screws. The tightening torque remains set at 12 Newton meters. Now we are going to insert the aluminium spacer. A steel spacer along with a second steel spacer, and finally the drum. We take a drum nut retainer that will fit into the cut of the drum, and we bend one side of it as a safety measure, just like this. We continue with the clutch discs. There are two padded discs, which are darker colour, which will go on the exterior part of the clutch unit. Another 4 padded discs that are lighter in colour, and 5 iron spacing discs. For each padded disc, we also have an iron disc. Let's make sure everything turns correctly and flawlessly. We are then going to insert the clutch lifter and the clutch disc cover. A spring, the aluminium spacer, and one 5x30 screw. We help ourselves by keeping the clutch bell still, and we complete the fastening of the clutch disc cover. At this point, we can also check that the clutch disengages. We now finish with the clutch protection cover with the 6/4 6x20 screws. We now move to the suction unit.
modo aspirazione. Puliamo bene
We need to make sure and properly clean the inside of the crankcase from
l'interno del
any
carico
excess
per
compound.
eventuale pasta in eccesso. Andiamo a
We
inserire
insert the lamella
la
pyramid,
nostra
or the
piramide
reed
lamellare,
block, which has two dovetail crossbows
due balestrini a coda di rondine e due
and
lamelle
two reeds with separate petals,
petali di
which
ridi
will go in the lower part,
andrà
and a whole
nella
reed
parte
pack
sottostante,
with a
una lamella,
V-shaped crossbow
diciamo
that
intera,
goes in the upper part.
un balestrino a V che va nella parte superiore.
We have our plastic conveyor,
Di plastica, una
the
guarnizione,
gasket,
il collettore,
the rubber manifold inserted into the flange,
cercando
trying
di
to
tenere
center
bene
the
sopra
rubber manifold with the
il
edge
gomma
of the internal
in bordo
plastic
del
conveyor.
spogliatore in plastica interno.
We always finish with a tightening torque of 12 Newton meters.
Andiamo ora a
Next,
riposizionare
we are going to
il motore di
reposition
trasmissione.
the ignition stator.
Andiamo a
We
inserire la
insert the key
chiavetta
on the crankshaft seat
nella sede sull'albero motore.
and our rotor.
Motore. Dopo aver inserito
After
poi
adding 250
250
milliliters
ml
of
di
oil
di cambio
into the
sul
gearbox,
basamento,
our crankcase is ready.
possiamo passare ora
We can now
al
move
montaggio
to the
del
assembly
Reposition.
of the cylinder unit.
Puliamo
Let's clean the engine surface from any excess red compound.
il motore da eventuale pasta rossa in eccesso.
Lightly lubricating the bearings, the connecting rod cage, and the piston cage.
E la gabbietta del pistone.
We then
Inseriamo
insert the piston.
il pistone.
There is already a ring in the seat.
Nella sede,
We are going to add the second ring.
il secondo anellino. Controlliamo bene
Checking that the piston rod and rings are inserted properly.
appoggiamo la guarnizione
We are going to lubricate the piston and the cylinder liner.
pistone,
While pushing the segment.
nel cilindro, andando ora a schiacciare il segmento.
Let's insert the piston into the cylinder.
Nel cilindro.
We are going to turn the piston up and down 2 or 3 times, then insert the 4 nuts.
Inseriamo i 4 dadi.
Finishing with a torque of 18 Newton meters or a maximum of 20. We insert 2R on the cam and 2R on the outside for the cylinder head.
2R esterno della testa cilindro,
We position the head
la testa,
six washers and the 6 8mm nuts.
avviciniamo
We bring the head closer,
la testa
always using a crosswise pattern,
croce,
and we finish with the tightening torque of the head
serraggio della
at
testa,
15 or an
indice
absolute
massimo
maximum
16
of 16 Newton meters. And with this last step, our rock shifter is ready.